Good evening. Welcome to Athens City Council, Monday, February 25th, 2013. This evening, Council will be meeting in several committee meetings, actually two committee meetings, Planning and Development Committee, Finance and Personnel Committee. But we are going to begin the evening with a public hearing regarding our Community Housing Improvement Program, the CHIP program. Introduced by
Greg Andrews. We're covering it.
Hi, Greg Andrews, Hocking-Asbury Community Action Agency. Welcome to the 2013 Community Housing Improvement CHIP first public hearing, City of Athens. I want to give a brief overview of the program, and then we can open the floor up for any discussion. The national and state objectives and goals of the program. The national objectives are to primarily benefit low to moderate income families, to aid in the prevention or elimination of slum and blight conditions, and to meet an urgent need of the community which poses a serious and immediate threat to health or welfare if no other resources are available. The goals of the program are to provide funding for a flexible, community-wide approach to the implementation of affordable housing for low and moderate income persons and develop local administrative capacity. Available funding this year is $20,872,000. That's down from about $24 million last year. And funds are available through federal CDBG and Home Investment Partnership Program funds, as well as Ohio Housing Trust Fund dollars. The CHIP funds will be distributed in one competitive round, and a community is only allowed to submit one application. The grant ceiling this year is a maximum of $400,000, which is down from $500,000 last year, obviously due from the decrease in funding available. And the application deadline is April 5th. The eligible activities for the program: private owner rehabilitation, rental rehabilitation, home ownership activity, acquisition, rehab, and resale, home repair septic, which won't apply to the city program, and new housing construction, as well as emergency monthly housing assistance and tenant-based rental assistance. Some supportive activities with the program: clearance and demolition, acquisition, relocation, code enforcement, planning, and some public service is available, such as homebuyer education, family self-sufficiency, and home maintenance training. Income guidelines for the program are at 80% of the county median. And the previous city CHIPS was 2008 program was funded at $317,000. In that program, the city completed 3 rehabilitations, 1 down payment rehabilitation, and 13 home repairs. And the current 2011 program is funded at $522,400. And that program will be completing 3 private owner rehabs, 13 home repairs, and 5 rental rehabs. That's an overview of the program. Have any questions? Yes.
A quick question. So we're mostly done with our present cycle?
We are. We're working with Metropolitan Housing on the rental rehab, and those are yet to be started, but we're just working through some details on that. Okay. The rehabs are all selected, and I believe they're either underway or complete. Most of the private home repairs are completed, although I believe we're doing some active marketing right now. I think there are 4 slots still available, which those are up to an average of about $8,000 for 1 or 2 major repairs on a home for homeowners that meet the income eligibility guidelines. And that money's a grant. There's no recapture, there's no repayment on that. So it's a great opportunity. I really encourage folks to be aware of that and to apply.
In terms of repairs, we also talk about painting and what exactly?
It's really pretty open. They're identified as threats to health and safety, but it's beyond that. It's pretty much open. But they're again at about $8,000. So these for low to moderate income families, these are repairs that may be just out of reach, a new roof or furnace or a larger repair.
Okay. Is it possible to send the list to the city council members?
Absolutely.
Or at least to Debbie Walker, so we have and I know you have a meeting coming up March to review the strategy for the next cycle.
Right. Yeah, a required component of the program is to have a planning component, and that's the Housing Advisory Committee, and I believe April 5th is the city's program. I believe that's correct.
Okay. Is it April 5th? Okay.
I'm sorry.
March 5th.
Yeah.
And if you don't mind, I'll probably send, a survey was sent to me of what the needs are, perceived needs are, and they want that completed before March 5th.
Yes, before the meeting. The planning component is very, very detailed by the program, everybody that will be in attendance. It's to identify what resources are available and what are not, more importantly.
Okay.
Just a few questions about the process. So, as I understand, you'll have this planning group that will get together, and they represent people from the city of Athens, and then they determine what might be the greatest need. I'm trying to
Right.
get a
Yeah,
little
it's primarily it's service providers will be brought together to identify what services they provide and determine what the needs are, what's not being addressed. And hopefully we can kind of gear the program to meet those needs. But, it is a housing program, and so
If you wish, I could always send you a copy of the survey questions so you get a feel for what they're looking at. Again, we could always compile them and put them into the mix as well. But it has to follow a certain program of what we can do and what we decide to do, and whether it's attainable, really, is the other message that's always out there. Because we get graded on how well we do. That's why I asked how we were unrolling the last one, because that affects our eligibility for the next cycle.
Sure. So maybe something like the planning process for safe routes to schools, where we have a planning mechanism in place with particular people involved. And I just wondered if there are any, not lessons, but any kind of needs that you have seen that have come out of this last grant cycle that are of particular interest. Like, is there more of a demand for the rental, or for the privately owned, more for emergency repair, or more for general rehab?
the rental component is it's somewhat restricted because there's a pretty major requirement with landlord contributions, and the state recommends a 50% contribution from landlords, and that's considerable. So that kind of deters landlords from participating, actually.
Okay.
But the home repair activity, although we've fallen a bit behind in the city with that, I'm certainly not concerned about meeting the goals. We certainly will, but that activity is pretty popular throughout.
That kind of raises the question, and I'm not, completely understanding how all the nuances of the program, but are there separate pots? In other words, are there separate accounts under CHIP for rental versus, home improvement, owner improvements, rebuilds, tear downs? Is it parsed out in that way, or is it one lump sum and you just rack and stack the different
It's pretty much one lump
applications?
sum. Now, with home repair, there is a cap of $125,000. That's the maximum amount that we can expend for home repair activities. But then it's pretty much, we can mix and match as the needs require.
Okay.
But as the mayor commented, it's very important that the outcomes be met, because that's a pretty high grading tool in future programs. If you don't meet your outcomes, it's extremely difficult to be funded the following cycle. They're competitive grants, and believe me, they're very competitive.
And did you say earlier that this year's program was capped at $400,000?
This grant cycle was capped at $400,000. I sat on the advisory committee with the state, and there was a lot of brainstorming going on to try to spread the money as much as we can. And to keep a program viable, you can't go much below $400,000. You can't keep the administrative infrastructure in place to less than that. So that's where they've capped it at. So hopefully we'll be able to fund a number of programs.
Questions from the public too, I guess.
I'm sorry?
Any questions from the public would be the next one, really.
Yeah. Council members, anybody out in the public have a question at this time? When is another meeting planned?
The second public hearing hasn't been determined yet. A date hasn't been determined. We need to get through the Housing Advisory Committee and bring that all together before we can schedule the next meeting.
Okay, so
That'll be announced publicly.
to be
There's-
scheduled.
And the only other thing is, everybody, if they haven't filled out the public meeting...
Sign in, please do.
sheet. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, that'll conclude the hearing. Thanks.
Okay.
We'll move on to our first committee meeting. President of this committee is Chris Fall, Planning and Development. We have several issues to deal with tonight.
Great, thank you.
Member Fall?
Thank you. First is a revocable license for 63 North Court Street, which is the balcony issue. After working, putting together all the issues that came up in the last few committee meetings and working with Pat Lang, our law director, we have come up with an ordinance granting a revocable license for this project. I have a draft of it here. I'll briefly go over those requirements. It's for a 4-foot balcony, 48 inches. And we did speak a lot about the things that we wanted attached with the revocable license. This is unusual for a revocable license. This looks different than the one I'll talk about the next agenda item, is that it is much more detailed and such. And the Section 3 has the following conditions. Revocable license will be personal in nature, accessors to the Gator Guys LLC and assigns and will be in effect with the licensee having quiet enjoyment of the property as long as there are no change of use of the property. That means if somebody goes in and buys the property, turns it back into a restaurant, a hotel, any of the other kind of uses that are in that area, that they would have to go through a revocable license again. City of Athens will be named as additional insured. They shall include noise reduction design elements, which is something that we talked a lot about, that they also assign shall be responsible for maintenance and upkeep of said public right-of-way. Any of these conditions will be reason, if they're not done, shall be a reason to revoke the revocable right-of-way. There's also conditions put on it. They have to be put in the lease agreement. Not more than 25 people shall occupy the balcony at any given time. Warning signs shall be posted near or on the balcony regarding limit. Unobstructed access during response to police calls. No personal objects or furniture may be kept out on the any time on the balcony. And noise ordinance time limits will be put into the lease agreement. And that this ordinance shall be recorded also with the Athens County Recorder. So, I think that most of the things that we talked about have been put in to this. So I'd like to open it up for conversation, questions.
Council members?
Chris?
So, as I understood the process last time, we were going to look at this particular case, but also then look at language for an ordinance
Yes.
for other revocable licenses.
Right. I talked with the planner about that process. That will have to, we discussed it quite a bit. That will have to go through the Planning Commission. So we can either ask them, write them a letter, or prod the planner to do that. We can do it officially or semi-officially, but they realize that there is some need to clean the language up for this particular thing. So, Michelle?
So I just need to say that we have had a lot of discussion about this, and I have received a lot of comments, mostly negative. Most people that have come to me and I've asked for feedback do not think it should be granted. They don't want to see another terrace, whatever we want to call it, balcony on Court Street. My concern it may be administrative or not, we do have some inconsistencies. We've not necessarily said that out loud, but I am saying it out loud. We do have inconsistencies out there with balconies and additions to the front of buildings that we thought were 18 inches and aren't, so we're not necessarily all on the same page here. And so that, I've also explained that to other people. So I do think we have some things we need to have cleaned up, not just the ordinance language, but possibly the way that we follow up on variances and different things, because I don't think it's been consistent. So with this group coming and asking for 48 inches into our right-of-way, we again just don't have a consistency here that I wish that we could fall back on and say, yes, everybody only got 18 inches or whatever. So I personally don't know that I'm happy with 48 inches. Some of the other ones that we've measured are 24 inches. There's a 30-inch out there. So I don't know if we, I'm not saying that the language should be changed in the ordinance. I just know that we have inconsistencies. So as we make our vote, I know that's one thing that's in the back of my mind. And that may make it muddy the waters and not clear it up, but I just felt like that needed to be said.
As the junior member of this committee, I say let's move forward with the way the language is written now. Let's get this thing over with. I'm for it. I'm going to vote for it. Nothing here is going to change my mind, so let's get it out and get it done. The end.
Anybody down here?
Yeah, we certainly have had plenty of discussion on this, and I think that's good. It's healthy to have this debate about what our, the center of our town is going to look like, and what the aesthetics will be, and how the city will handle these types of issues now and in the future. I just want to thank you, Member Fall, for all the work that you've put into this and the time and effort that you've put into trying to balance the opposing viewpoints on this issue and come up with something that at least we can consider at our next council meeting. So thank you.
I'd like to echo Member Gosney. I want to thank the whole committee for all the work that has gone into exploring all the options and identifying the fact that there are inconsistencies. And it's not, in my mind, not just the inconsistencies with balcony features, but it's inconsistencies with any facade element that may be going, because there's some that are 7 feet out into the street, out over our right-of-way. So I'm hoping that when the time comes to start cleaning up this particular ordinance, that we're very clear about what constitutes a balcony, what constitutes an awning, what constitutes any feature that still, goes over our air right-of-way. But again, I'm 100% in support of this ordinance as it was described this evening, and we'll read through it next week and hear more about it. But I support this plan and applaud you for sticking with the 48 inches.
Thank you. Again, thank you for your work on this, and thank you for taking time to dig into the details. I was curious, and I don't know if you feel comfortable speaking for the law director, but I know in the past the discussion or concerns or worries about potential setting a precedent with this particular irrevocable license, thank you. And I was curious if that came up in any of the discussions and his assistance in formulating this. Was there any discussion of that or any other new worries or concerns?
Well, I mean, he knows that we discussed that
Okay.
a huge amount. I did talk to him about that. That's why, that's why it's not something that's cookie cutter. I mean, it is a very different look to this public right-of-way. And it is it's going through the mayor's office. It's actually more of a, instead of city council what normally we do with a revocable license is, which we'll do, the next agenda item is, they fulfill certain requirements, and we just kind of give it, because normally those things can be removed. And so, since it has to go through the administration, it's administration and city council working together to try to cover all the bases of this particular thing. I think it does set a precedent to the point that we realize that we have inconsistencies, and we have to work with the Planning Commission to change our right, maybe look at our right-of-way ordinance and look at how that needs to be updated. As I've always said, planning is a very organic activity, and so you always have to look at your ordinances and such. And I know that there's other things that I would like to look at in the right-of-way. So I think that would make sense. Precedent's not always bad. It does, kind of move people and cities to look at things in new light and try to keep up with the times.
Thank you. Thank you. I had another question, too, regarding the revocable license. And you can help me understand this. So tonight, the information that you're presenting, is it the draft you said for a revocable license, or is it a whole new ordinance?
It's a draft for a revocable license.
Okay, so we would be potentially this could be discussed or voted.
Next Monday, I will introduce it as an ordinance.
Okay.
The revocable license, the ordinance, the city code that covers what a revocable, what a right-of-way consists of, and the rules and regulations that overarch the whole right-of-way needs to be looked at in terms of what the issues that were brought up in this whole case. So we need probably to put some new definitions in. We need to look at some widths and discuss the difference between an architectural element and a building element and some of the other things. And that will be something that we'll have to do with the Planning Commission. And I will work further with Paul Logue in crafting an update to our right-of-way ordinance, our code for that.
And then that was my next question regarding our planner, Paul Logue. Did he in turn as well have a chance to look at this and/or offer feedback, or is this?
He offered feedback in the very beginning,
Okay.
and he hasn't really changed his.
Okay, so that's consistent.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Correct. He is opposed to.
because of the precedents.
Okay.
So, and he realizes that now we need to go and look at our code for the right of way. So we'll be working on that in the future.
If I could address one of your questions, Kent, I also asked Pat about precedents, and this isn't, I think we have to make sure that we're treating everyone fairly, and so for that, I think the precedence is we need to be consistent. But in terms of a legal, the precedence with a legal context is very different, but, so I'm just going to quote two quick sentences from Pat. Basically, council can choose to empower the mayor to enter into a right-of-way agreement whenever and however they see fit. Every case is different, so I wouldn't be too concerned with the precedent issue. So from the legal question, that was Pat's
Okay.
answer to me, at least. So,
Thank you. And our
You're welcome.
inconsistencies in the past
Always we're consistent.
Okay. We're consistently inconsistent.
I think that, every city deals with this, the fact that new technologies, new uses, new ways of dealing with things, all those sort of things, and that's why you never have, especially planning documents and, zoning codes, and those sort of things are never set in stone. And that's why we review things and update them. So I think that that's a legitimate sort of path to follow after this. So well, I'm hearing that the kind of general consensus is to put this up for first reading on Monday as it sits. And we will get it out to you this week as an electronic copy. So,
Thank you,
Thank
Member
you.
Troll. Thank you.
okay.
Hard work. Any other comments or questions from council members? Anybody from the audience need to speak?
I just want to thank you for all the work you did put into it, and everybody, it's been discussed a lot, and thanks for all the time, especially all the time you put in it, especially over the last week.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you, Member Troll. Okay, and moving on.
Okay. The next one is a right-of-way. We have another revocable license. However, this is a very simple one, just like all the other ones that we deal with. This is a 10-year renew for Kimes, 75 Kimes Lane in Athens, and they want a renewal for their directional sign so that people visiting Kimes can find their driveway. They have put in all their paperwork, and all the various administrative departments have signed off on it, and everything's fine. So it's like the two ends of our revocable license here. So I will put this in as an ordinance next Monday, too. So, any questions about that?
I do have a question on where, can you explain to us where, I see the map on the back.
Right. Well,
Just
it's the
where
same
that-
sign.
It is the same.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
okay,
think
so
that
it's just
they're,
the
I mean,
renewal
it
of
says.
existing.
Yeah.
Got it.
It's actually in the right-of-way, I believe, our city right-of-way, but we gave them the
10 years ago, it's
Yeah.
10-year renewable.
Renewal, okay,
So,
same location.
And the issue
Yeah.
then, 10 years ago, was getting to Kimes. Basically, it's not intuitively easy to get there.
so if you go out there now, there's a sign, so it's a renewable, it's a renewed, revocable license. Okay. The next agenda item is, we have some representatives from CACL who would like to discuss with council tonight about possibly changing city code to allow for urban chickens in Athens. They've come a couple times, and so I thought that probably now would be a good time to have them give their presentation about urban chickens. We have talked about this before. I would like to say that I appreciate the energy and the preparation that you guys have done. I think that's great. It shows the thoughtfulness that you guys have put into it before you've come to city council. So I'd like you to just take it away.
Just let me interject a moment. The gentleman here is doing exactly the right thing. He's signing in, and he'll have 3 minutes to speak. The timing doesn't start until after he signs in and is ready to go. The red light will go, and let us know when time is up.
Great. Should I hand this out?
Steve, go ahead.
Also, Deborah should have something, or maybe she already handed it out.
Yep, we have copies.
Trying to get all the bases covered here.
Great, thanks.
Checks.
Thank you.
All right.
Go ahead.
Okay, great. Thanks again for making the time, allotting us this time to meet with you and talk with you. Based on your feedback outside of these committee meetings via email, I've gotten some great inquiries, questions, comments on what we could do to possibly go about this process, and especially concerns about community health and such. So this is the amendment as stands now. It's a working document. I encourage you to look it over. Please give us feedback. Actually, if you would like to write an email on there, it's ihvier@yahoo.com. And please review this. I know last time histoplasmosis was a big concern, so I attached a fact sheet concerning what that is. It's endemic to this area, so chickens don't greatly alter that. I don't perceive it as a large threat. What we want to do is make this as simple as possible, few alterations as possible to city code. So right at the second section below the potential amendment, there's parts of city code which already pertain to this issue. Please review those, and if you have any questions, let me know. Sorry, I'm going to have to kind of speed through this. The benefits there, some really great things about having chickens in the area. Attached, there's some reasoning, which some of you may have already seen. And then attached, we have the Ann Arbor permit process, the form here written in sort of legalese. Very clearly presents, I think, what could be a very successful model. And then we also have 7 false myths about urban chickens, which will cover all the basics of the main concerns about chickens that people have: noise, odor, etc. So it's starting to beep here. I suppose that's about it for your consideration and your review. Please get back to me with any questions or comments, and hopefully we can move forward from there.
You have an extra copy?
Yes, absolutely.
Do people have questions for the? I think some people have some questions right now.
Okay.
I guess I'll start off. Can you name a couple other cities that allow the keeping of chickens within city limits?
Absolutely. I've covered that in here as well in the reasoning section. This would be down in the second page of the reasoning on the second to last paragraph. In Ohio, we have Columbus, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Akron. Even here in the Plains.
Plains is not a city.
Oh, well.
Just made yourself popular.
They're proud that they're not a city.
So
And then also larger cities like Chicago, New York, and Atlanta. And they have these small coops in these really fairly small spaces. These aren't large spacious yards. That includes in downtown Manhattan that they're legal. And if that were a huge health concern, I think that you would see them overturning this. But it stands, continues to stand, and people seem to really enjoy it. I know I did when I had them.
And it seems to me that it's something that that is catching on in new cities. Just from doing some reading that I did last time we discussed this, it was probably a year and a half ago, maybe.
Absolutely.
It seems like it's something that's picking up a little bit of momentum, especially in places like Athens, where there's a really great local food economy, local food effort to try to promote sustainable agriculture. And so for me, I think it's a good fit for the city. I know that there are some concerns people will have and have voiced already when we've discussed this in the past, but for me, from what I know now, the balance is on supporting something like this.
Thank you for pointing that out. I think that's a very good point for the issue. They cover that in the first paragraph of the 7 false myths about urban chickens. The trend for backyard flocks is so strong that in the past 2 years, over 500 towns and cities have revised their laws to allow urban folks to keep their chickens. So yeah, it's definitely catching on. Also in the reasoning section, that's just sort of me explaining personally why I think this is important, and well, as a group, I should say, why this kind of thing can benefit the community as a whole, especially towards localized food movement. And actually, I talk about Village Bakery and Casa Nueva, and definitely this is sort of a hotbed of a local food movement. So it's really exciting to be a part of that, and I think that the way that things are now stands in contrast to that.
And on a very related topic, pretty much the same one, just to remind council members, probably, 2 years ago, front yard gardens were illegal in the city. And we made the necessary changes to city code to allow people to grow food in their yard. And so we have been working on related issues to this.
Well, thank you. I have gardens in my front yard.
Do we have other council members that want to speak?
I wondered about the city of Columbus, as I've read through some of their information, has a health commission that needs to approve a permit. And so is this something that you're thinking of suggesting for a process here?
Yes, absolutely. I wanted to suggest a permit process Of course, I think it would be best for the city to decide whose jurisdiction that is, but based upon other cities, what they're doing, it seems to be the code enforcement office, seems to be taking care of the permit
I think
process.
Columbus is the health commissioner. I'm not sure under which department they're housed under. And so that would be one question, if we were to consider such a thing, who would enforce it and who has the resources to be able to enforce that? At the moment, we struggle with the staff that we have to get through the rental inspections through the code department. So it'd certainly be a concern. And I had shared with you an email about my concern about disease and spreading, and I will read through the more of the facts and the myths that you've submitted to us, and I appreciate that. And I know some of the information is for the Centers for Disease Control. Centers for Disease Control also has information on salmonella and talks about raising chickens in urban environments as a very definite risk for children for salmonella. And so would need to be, if we were to consider something like this, I think we'd need to be really very careful about what kind of requirements we would have for housing for the chickens. And so that it's sufficient so that if a neighboring child walks in the yard, as your kids could, and, just out of interest, then be exposed to salmonella. Potentially. It's not that all chickens have it, but there would be the risk of that. So it's another health concern from my perspective. And I think that's part of the reason that from a public history standpoint or a public health standpoint in cities, and I know conditions have improved, but that is much of the reason that that livestock and animals were banned from city environments, was because of the close proximity to humans and the germs potentially that can be shared. So those are some of my concerns about it.
Other council members?
Go ahead.
Me?
I think that's something that was a concern the last time, the discussion that we had around chickens, was that right now we don't have an animal control officer that comes and deals with all the nuisance dogs that we have. And there's, and cats, more dogs. I think that the concern is to add a whole nother species into the mix, and I realize there's no roosters, which helps to alleviate some of that concern, but there is, as Chris said, that we are short-staffed, so that's my main concern, is the ability to be able to deal with nuisance and adding a whole nother layer of potential enforcement or permitting, those sort of things to it. I think that that's something that we still have much discussion about, just with dogs and cats.
Horizon, you started to say something?
I was just wondering what happens if some of the eggs hatch and now you have a bunch of chicks instead of just hens? What do we do then?
Well,
Well, let's just play hypothetical. You get some eggs and something happens and...
I suppose that would be
A rooster comes to
immaculate
visit.
conception. Yeah.
Well, actually, no, in fowls, it can't happen. It's called parthenogenesis, and in fowl, it is perfectly possible for an egg to fertilize itself. I mean, that's a scientific fact.
I'll look into that. I hadn't heard of that.
Really? Yeah. Of course, the only thing that can come out of it would be another hen. But you still have a chick. So to get back to my original question,
Are you a...
I mean, what do we do with them? I mean,
If you had an extra hen,
suddenly you now have chicks, and the law says I can only have 4 hens.
Right.
Okay, now, how do I dispose of the excess?
Well, I
mean,
suppose...
would that person be in violation of the law or the way it's written, or, I mean...
If they only can have 4, then yes, they would be, and they would have to decide what to do with it.
Give it to a friend.
Yeah.
That was what I was thinking. Thank you for bringing that up.
Neighbor, and then things just sort of ballooning.
I mean, there are other codes out there that have limits on animals. I mean, I was reading about, in San Diego, which is a fairly conservative city, they have a very progressive agriculture code in their city. And they allow dwarf goats, but you can have 2 female goats. And if you, you can breed them, but once the kids get to be 2 months of age, they have to be given away, and sold or whatever. But, if you have 15 cats there and people complain about it, you have to do something. I don't think that's, and I think that the idea that you're going to have all these hens having chicks without any roosters around is probably pretty rare.
Probably. Yes.
My concern continues to be enforcement, so that's one of how we would do that. And we have difficulty enforcing many things already. So, and for me, it's not just chickens. It would be any animal that anyone would choose to have, whether it's a dog or a cat. We have a serious problem with cats, if anybody hasn't noticed. They're everywhere, and they roam everywhere. So, and yeah, well, they might get the chickens. So, I don't know. That's one of my largest concerns, which was already mentioned.
Thank you. Again, appreciate your work on this. An interesting statistic that I came across a few years back was that I believe in Portland, Oregon, where they document this process similar to what would be requested through the Ann Arbor proposal. So you have to register, so you can keep statistics and addresses to where everyone is that's owning urban chickens. But the data indicated that it was, I believe, less than half of 1%. I don't know if you saw that number as well, of the population chose to own. So less than half of 1%, I think, is a pretty minuscule amount of people in the city of Athens that would be potential owners.
So 23,000 population in the city, the 1%,
And then half of that.
and then half of that. So 230, so it could be 100 or so people. Which would be a good measure for saying, in terms of the registry, the licensing, the inspection, the enforcement, if penalties were needed, what kind of time that might take for the code enforcement office, if it was the code enforcement office, or if it's the health department. And have we had input from the health department on this?
I talked with Chuck Hammer, and I know that you have communicated with him too, and so he's willing to come in and discuss things if we have more discussion with this sort of thing. So.
Are we talking about individuals owning 4 chickens? Are we talking about per household?
Household.
Okay, so it's not 23,000 households. We don't have that.
Oh, no, we don't.
No. How many households do we have?
About 6,000.
6,000, so now it's 1%.
That, realize that includes apartments and
Sure.
townhouses.
Right.
But some of those would likely be, some of those locations wouldn't have the ability to own because they wouldn't have property or space.
Hanging chicken coops off the balcony.
Well,
I don't know.
balcony,
So I'm guessing.
48-inch balcony.
A lot of room for chickens.
So when you got started, so you're suggesting that amount would be smaller,
Okay,
So the numbers would be
even smaller.
less than 6,000 if you
possibly.
take out the apartment.
Possibly. That's only a possible.
Well, it also depends on how we would write the code.
Of course.
Member Patterson?
I am concerned as well just about the manpower for having individuals patrolling and looking into any incidents that may occur. But I think more importantly, something that's kind of come up, and this has come up with talking to some of the area farmers, some of the farmers in the surrounding environs around Athens who raise chickens. And I was reading through one of your myths in here about chickens attracting predators. I'm sure that probably is, this myth is dispelled within a more urban environment, within larger cities, where the predators are probably kept more at bay by mankind rather than by other means. But with Athens butting up against the Wayne National Forest, and there's a lot of avenues, I would think. And so I think something that I would also like to see would be that somehow, I don't think this would have to be a registry of any type, but it would, to get some input from the county game warden or state warden to, because who knows, there could be a spike in coyotes running through the area, which would make for an interesting menace within the city itself. It's not that we're the most urban of environments. We've got the whole Hocking River running through the middle, and that's got the Nature Conservancy. It's open, it's free range. I'm not saying no to this idea. I'm just saying I think there's a little more planning that needs to go into safeguards for protecting the citizens and protecting the chickens. I know all the nets and netting that is put up for around mobile chicken coop areas isn't 100% foolproof against predators. They'll find a way in one way or another.
I also remember reading some other legislation that addressed some of those concerns, requiring predator-proof feed containers. So that's something else that could be potentially written into the legislation that's being proposed within Athens to help deter potential predators from the food.
What kind of predator would eat chicken feed?
Raccoons, possums. I mean, the idea that having a huge number of predators come through, coyotes will go after cats as it stands now. Coyotes aren't really that big of a problem in southwest Ohio. I think that when you're in western parts or the Rockies, you would be much more concerned about bringing in, because they do have much more of an interface with areas that do have bigger predators. Maine, you have to worry about fishers coming in, but they'll take a cat just as soon as take a small dog or a chicken or peacocks, for what you know. So
Alligators.
yeah, we can have with global warming, we can have alligators up here. So.
Do we have other people that want to speak to us about this issue? No. Member Fall, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. So I think that this is a good start on discussion. I know that this is a very controversial topic, and I commend you with the research that you've done and approaching it in a good way. Mayor Weil?
Just to add a few things, I did talk to County Commissioner Laney Lyson about, one time we had a cooperative with animal control. He corrected me on that. He said that was almost exclusively dogs at the time.
Right.
He'd be not willing to reinstitute that at this point. So that means we wouldn't be working with the county. We do give money to the health department, about $26,000, I think, a year. It is a city-county health department, so they have some jurisdiction and actions within the city. What that would look like is another matter. The process-wise, if I understand, since it is going through Title 23, it has to go to Planning Commission, I believe, for the setbacks, right? Okay.
Is there comments from the audience? Can you come up? Come up? Yeah. Otherwise, people can't hear you out in TV land.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you can sign your name and. Thank you.
They took the pen. They took the pen. They took the pen.
Thank you. Is that the pen? Okay.
Budget cuts.
Put one of those giant pens.
Yeah, I just had a question. I'm not affiliated with the group here, but I
Please
just,
tell us your name. I'm sorry.
my name is Matthew Carlisle.
Thank you, Matthew.
And I just had a question. Would you guys consider possibly giving like a year trial run for having chickens being allowed in the backyards of residents' homes or yards? I mean, and after that year, you would evaluate this went
really well, all these fears that we had aren't really happening, or all these fears we had are happening, we're going to get rid of it. Is there a possibility where there'd be like a trial run period, and then after that period of time, you reevaluate?
Well, I think we are always reevaluating our code, as the balconies showed. So, that is a possibility. I think that would be something that would have to be worked out with the whatever jurisdiction. But I think that's a fair question. I think that.
Thank you.
So, thank you. Well, I suspect that we will be getting a lot of comments from people about this. So I think that this will be the start of an ongoing conversation to see where it can go. And I think that there are challenges here that other cities don't have, namely personnel, and some of those interesting challenges with rentals versus other sort of things that we will have to look at. And so I suspect that we will be bringing this up again in committee, or maybe a smaller group of concerned citizens and people. Yeah. Oh, yes.
Hi, I'm Badger Johnson.
Well, Badger signs in, I'll float another idea. I like the trial idea, and who knows if this will have the support to get to that point or not. There's also totally the possibility of limiting the number of permits for a trial period. And so if there are concerns that will be overrun by coyotes or badgers or some other animal, there are ways to test the waters here and see how that goes.
No badgers here.
Or chicks.
Or chicks.
So I wanted to address the concern about salmonella. A lot of those concerns are, and a lot of the concerns in general about health and disease are not really geared to a situation that we would create that would resemble what we had, 70 or 80 years ago with livestock in the city. I'm from Cincinnati, and there was an incredible pork processing industry there, and they had lots and lots of pigs, and eventually they just got rid of it because it wasn't practical. There's a lot of farmland outside the city. But a lot of the salmonella cases are actually from factory farms, and a lot of the statistics and a lot of the data that people have looking at this and probably bring it to your attention are about those large-scale concentrated animal feeding operations. And, they're walking around in their own poop, and they're pooping on their eggs, and then they come to the supermarket and, what was it? They're all from those kinds of operations primarily. The other thing about monies spent by the health department, and I think that's probably a pretty good move, is tying them in, is we're proposing that you fill out a permit, just a couple of pages like the one from Ann Arbor. You get you have to talk to all the occupants in the surrounding properties, get their sign off on it, and you can read about histoplasmosis, where that's important for people who are immunocompromised, but you don't even get to apply before you get everybody on board. And then those are the people who are going to be affected. The histoplasmosis spores and salmonella are not going to be transmissible to people down the block. And the warden or the police officer or the health department official would not visit the site unless there was a complaint from a neighbor, in which case, you look at the paper and say, yeah, you haven't cleaned up the poop in a week, or you're, not properly composting of it if you're elected to try and compost it on site. So I think it would probably be a pretty minimal draw on city resources. You can imagine scenarios where it would be a huge problem. Everybody's got a flock of hens, but we've tried to address those concerns.
Any other questions?
can I make a comment as well? My simple comment would be to encourage people to contact their elected officials if you have an opinion about this. I know in the past I received much more support for this than opposition. So if out there in TV land and within the city, if you have concerns or issues or worries or fears, then contact any one of us and the mayor about this so that we know where you stand and where the community sits on this issue. Thank you.
Okay. That's what I have for Planet. Well, I have one small miscellaneous. I'm still working on the monitoring program fee. We're getting together, I'm getting together with various administrators and to work out the finer details of the program. So hopefully in a couple weeks, I'll be able to bring it to committee. So, is there anything else for miscellaneous planning and development? Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
We'll move on to Finance and Personnel Committee. Chris Nisley is the president. In charge.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have 5 items tonight. The first one being an update from Councilmember Butler on the brick repointing.
Thank you, Member Nisley. I'll be very brief in this, and perhaps I can offer a second or two to allow folks to transition out of the building. No worries. So during our recent auditor and finance and personnel meeting, we discussed with the mayor the desire to repoint the chimney in the city building here, largely for historical preservation as well as practicality. This is not a huge priority at the moment, and the mayor can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is something that we will likely be looking at either this spring or summer, and it might get tied into another project or two within the community. Is that correct, Mayor?
Well, okay, we have about 4 chimneys up on the top of the roof here. They're in bad shape. The reason why I don't have numbers for the estimate right now, and earlier, I think in December, we had a breakdown in terms of repointing the rest of the building. We might want to be rolling those together. Right now, the priorities for City Hall right now is getting the furnaces replaced, and you've already put through the appropriations for that. So until we look at get the numbers for this chimney and see if we want to put it together with the repointing of the bricks and on the walls, we're going to hold off on that. Maybe it happens sooner than later, though. I'll let you know as the numbers come out.
Thank you, Mayor.
Is this because the new furnaces will be going through the chimneys? I mean, are these used for exhaust of the furnaces?
The chimney that we started looking at is the one that's being used for exhaust for the 2 furnaces we have right now.
Right.
They've been pretty much etched away on the interior and they're structurally unsound. When we got a lift to look at it, I think it was, the start of February 5th, I think we had a lift go around and look at all the roof while we had it up there. We found out that some of the chimneys were actually in very bad shape, the mortars coming out. In particular, one that is using it as venting. I believe the concept right now we have is we'll go to 95 plus efficiency, which will not require a chimney at all because it usually vents through a PVC pipe at that point. So the intention is to not use the chimney for exhaust. We probably just put a hole through the wall where it comes out and not have to worry about it.
Or,
At the same,
line the chimney. I mean, that's the other
lining chimney is not an option. I think they said it's in too bad a shape to do that. Really, the whole thing is the problems with the exterior chimney parts. The parts we're talking about repointing are actually the ones that extend over the building. If you go to the parking garage, you can look at them there. I can send you some pictures of them. They gave me some of them, and the one that's being used is in a worse shape. The other ones are in less so, but they all will need replacement before they hit somebody with a brick. And again, I was told it would be fairly low price, but I'm not clear whether they're talking about all 4 chimneys or just the one that is in use. The other ones are really ornamental for the most part. And I know, as I say, sometime in November, December, Lands and Buildings, George basically gave us a number for some repointing. I thought it was a little on the low side, but because it was like we'll replace 60 bricks all over the building that have fallen apart, and I'm sure they'll find more along the way. So I really want to get that, maybe put them together as a project. And if it goes over 50, we'll have to do it out as a bid anyway. It depends on what's going to happen here. Again, I think, I don't have the number for the chimney, so I don't know if you want to move forward on it at this time.
Thank you.
Thank
Anything
you.
else to report on my end?
Our next agenda item is for vehicle replacement for the city, and Councilmember Patterson will cover that.
Thank you, Member Nisley. This is to replace a 1985 Chevy one-ton pickup that's being used by, through Lands and Buildings. It's the landscaping truck. It's a truck that carries around a water bowser or one of the big water tanks on it for going around and watering, and it's dated. It's pretty much run its life course, and it's time to replace it. The replacement vehicle is being looked at currently as a 2013 Ford F-250 four-wheel drive with a lift gate on it, and the lift gate will allow for it to now be used as a multi-purpose truck as opposed to just being saddled with the water bowser. The bowser can be taken off and removed. It can be used to haul other features or other items, equipment, you name it. The truck itself is $25,400. The lift gate fixture on it would be $2,600, $2,600 as an add-on onto the truck itself. I believe that this vehicle, or this particular thing, has gone through Green Fleet and has been...
There was a meeting, I think, last week, was it?
Yes, there was. I attended.
Member Reisner, you may want to, anything you want to
Well, we
mention about
talked
that?
about it and several other items, but I think the one they're actually replacing is a three-quarter ton, and they're upgrading up to a ton because they need a wider bed. Instead of an 8-foot, they need like a 10-foot to haul that tank. And what I liked about the whole idea was it, not only is it a more powerful vehicle, but you can swap the tank out and put anything else you want on there, and now you have a multi-purpose truck. It's just not a water truck anymore. So you're getting more bang for the buck. So that and the other one just about shot. So, and they're not even quite sure how they're going to dispose of the old one, if there's any real value to junking or salvaging anything from it. Probably you couldn't even get $1 off of it on eBay right now. So.
Well, again, it is a 1985 truck that has 1985 emission controls on it as opposed to 2013 emission controls, so it will be an improvement.
Okay, thank you.
Could I make my obligatory comment? It concerns me that we're replacing a small truck with a larger truck, even though it will have multi-purpose perhaps now compared to the old one. But just to move up in size, I think is probably unnecessary, but that's just my regular comment whenever we buy vehicles that I think are more inefficient than they need to be. So.
I understood the truck to be going from the existing one-ton truck to a three-quarter-ton truck is what I understood it to be. An F-250.
I think they're going up to a 350.
Yep.
Is that right?
I have a 250 on this one, and actually it says 12, so I don't know where the number 2013
I don't have the paperwork in
is.
front of me. My memory may be.
And it says it's Chevy 1985, one-ton, city number 211, so.
Okay.
So it is actually, as I understand it, to be that it's going down in size. I mean, what you raised is a good point, to where if you're hauling a lighter load, you're...
And particularly when the Green Fleets Committee I was in, we put this off, the city put off buying this a year ago maybe, because we didn't have the resources. And in that discussion, it was the same conversation as I think to what has been the outcome here. And I guess I'll try to find out the exact, maybe when you get the information on the final size, you can forward that to me.
Okay.
Thanks for the questions. Good to have it clarified, so we can move forward with it, hopefully. Next item is the wastewater treatment plant project, and we've been discussing this for several years. Council members and staff were provided with a worksheet I'll just give a little bit of background information before I work through the numbers on the worksheet. And also to let you know, and as I will mention this probably several times during the presentation, that the council committee finance members, the auditor's office staff, the service safety staff, and the mayor have reviewed the information that we're presenting on these costs. And I just wanted to thank everyone for taking the time to review it, ask questions, raise issues. It's been very helpful. By way of background, I just thought I'd give a very brief listing and what's sometimes referred to as SWOT, so strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and take a look at the wastewater treatment plant in regards to that. So our strength at this point is that our city staff does a wonderful job with the maintenance and operations at that facility, and I very much admire that. The weakness that this, what's called the wet side of the wastewater treatment plant operation, has not had a significant upgrade of the items proposed, that we are proposing now, in the 50 years since it was constructed. So that's considerable age, and a lot of technology has changed. Our opportunity is, I think that during this 2-year planning process, when we've been talking about the upgrades, we'd raise the level of the plant as one of the things, quite literally in its efficient, or figuratively in its efficiency, but also literally we will be raising the actual level of some of the buildings in the operations where it sits in the floodplain. It's down by the bike path behind the community center, so many of you have probably seen it. Council members have gone on a tour of this facility. And the other opportunities that the city water and public works staff expects this project to position our plant to properly treat our Athens wastewater for the next 60 years. The threat would be that without doing this, that we would risk at some point not being in compliance with discharge regulations that exist to keep our river clean. So that's part of why it's just a very important thing to be examining and looking at. We've put in place a series of ordinances to prepare the city finances and operations to move forward with this. In Ordinance 5311 established a rate increase of $2, and then Ordinance 7511 passed last year amended the rates with a 3% increase to be reviewed at the end of 5 years. We've also passed Ordinance 111, and that authorized the initial design engineering of this particular project. And then Ordinance 12812 that adjusts the sewer operations and sewer debt ratio split. You might remember that for our revenues that we bring in from sewer, we used to split it at 78% to operations, 22% to debt. And so we made a shift towards the end of last year where we said 75% towards operations and 25% of our revenue should go towards debt, hoping that this will raise the revenues that we can then use to pay off loans. So what we'll review in a few minutes of the worksheet that I provided to council members and staff are the final recommendations and associated loans that the city will need to put in place to borrow the money to make this happen. And we have every confidence in the auditor's office and the mayor's office in assisting us with monitoring the sewer rates to assure that we have adequate revenue to make the loan payments for this project. At one point, a few weeks ago in the committee meeting, I mentioned that staff members were considering some alternatives to the wastewater treatment plant. And Strand engineers, as I understand, presented 7 alternatives of additional things that could be completed, and which makes sense because the cost would be lower. We'd be doing the other upgrades, somewhat similar to the situation where we have with the code office, where we looked at new file cabinets, and then we said we've probably got carpeting that's very, very old and in need of replacement too. The Public Works Department met, they reviewed the alternatives and are recommending for us tonight 3 of the 7 alternatives. One would be for pump and control renovations, and that would repurpose the existing building for classroom and training space. Another one would be coating the digester walls, And Jeff Arnold, our head of the wastewater treatment plant, recommends this. He thinks that this will save maintenance costs, and that these walls, coating these digester walls, would be more important at this point than several of the other walls that were recommended in the different alternatives. And the other one, the other alternative to consider with it would be repaving the new, near the blower building, which is inside the plant facility area. So many of the other roadways in the plant will be paved at this time during the upgrades anyway, and it makes sense to try and to do this at the same time. So that recommendation, those alternatives would cost an additional $500,000. The Finance Committee at this point is recommending approval of the improvement project. But before we do that, what I'd like to do is walk you through the handout for the authorization and appropriation so that we fully, so all of us understand what that recommendation would involve. So if you'll all turn to your sheets that were either in your mailbox, they were also distributed to you by email this afternoon. At this point, the Water Pollution Control Fund of the Ohio EPA is expected to set our interest rate for a 20-year loan at 1.842. And the construction costs affiliated with borrowing the money, we would have $15 million in construction costs and $15,714,000, and that would be that incorporates alternatives, the three alternatives that I had just described: the control room renovations, the digester wall coating, and some of the repaving. The construction engineering costs are $1.29 million. We will receive a septage receiving station credit from the EPA. What this does is it's not an actual credit to the amount that we're borrowing, but rather a reduction of the interest rate. And so that's the cash value of that reduction in the interest rate. We have design engineering costs of $800,000, a contingency fee of 5%, which would be $850,000, and then, so that's a subtotal in a sense of $18,654,000. The capitalized interest, which I'm hoping I'm explaining correctly, it's a little bit, it seemed tricky to me, but this is the interest that accrues between the first payment and up to within 6 months of the end of the project, and that the value that it adds to the project is $466,000. So this would bring the grand total of the final loan amount to $19,121,000. As we were reviewing these costs and of the total project, we also looked then at what kind of loan payments would be necessary for us to borrow enough money to do these improvements. And the loan payments would be expected of the city 2 times per year, as much of our other loans are for our other water improvement projects that we've had in the past. And those loan payments would be $573,645 at 2 payments per year. So our grand total loan payments per year would be approximately $1.1 million. And the projected cost of this project over the 20 years of it would be $22,945,000. So we've looked at spreadsheets, both in meetings and then with city staff and their offices, to go over making sure that we have sufficient cash to make these loan payments. And very basically, if we have a 75-25 split, and we need $4 million in revenue per year so that we can pay out 25% of that for a $1 million loan payment. And so we have reviewed the sheets and realized that for the resources that we need to accomplish this from the sewage revenues, the auditor's office recommended that we do a month-by-month spreadsheet. And this was reviewed last week by the auditor's office as well as the Public Works office. And what this spreadsheet incorporated is rates of 3% increase in the sewer rates from the time we passed the legislation in 2012. through 2013, there would be a 3% increase per year. That's already been passed with Ordinance 7511. Then the proposal would be consecutive rate increases over the following years between 2016 and 17, a 4% increase. So that's tentative at this point. A 5% increase in 2018, 4% in 2019 through 22, and a 1% increase then for 2023 through 33. And that would take us for the duration of the 20-year loan for the improvements. It would be a grand total of a 31% increase in sewer rates from 2013 to 2033. And when we were looking at the spreadsheet, we sometimes saw some dips in the revenues brought in, and sometimes also then an increase in it. And these variations that we saw in the spreadsheet when we were looking at them would be for some of the earlier loans that would be paid off for our water improvements in 2000. And we have loans that we will be retiring in 2013, 2016, 2023. And for just general information, what we've done then at the very bottom of the spreadsheet is take a look at Athens and their annual sewer rates as compared with other cities. And the mayor provided this report for us, I think, from the Ohio EPA. Then, so these are the latest rates that we have available. It's their 2012 report, but only goes through 2010. Of Athens, Albany, Chillicothe, Kent, Lancaster, Marietta, and Nelsonville, the range in annual sewer rates was between $422 in Athens. We were near the lowest of all the rates, Chillicothe being the only one that was lower. Albany went to a high of $1,000 annually in their sewer rate fees. So we're next to lowest in the amount of sewer rate that we charge at the current time, just by way of comparison. So I'd open it up for questions or discussions. Discussion. Member Butler.
Thank you. And again, very beneficial information having this in front of us. Thank you to the Engineer's Office, Public Works, and your information here as well is terribly beneficial. I think what's really imperative is this acknowledgement that nothing has happened to the wet side in over half a century. Is that correct? That's what the understanding is.
There have been some other improvements, but not a major upgrade as I understand it, correct?
And it's well-deserved. Comparatively, our rates are much lower than those in communities of like size. I support this, moving forward with this immensely. It's needed, and I believe that the benefit far outweighs putting this off. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other comments? Member Reisner?
Are we still within EPA specs for effluent?
We are at the current point in time. I don't think we're in violation. I know that the EPA is eager to assist us with doing the upgrades because it's the Ohio EPA that is offering the 1.842 loan, and it's through their Water Pollution Control Fund. So when the representatives did meet with city staff, they were eager for us to make the upgrades before we would be in violation.
I just want to make sure that people understood that we're not doing this because we're in violation of anything. We're doing it because we're just good citizens looking towards the future. You know.
But that's a good point to clarify. Yes,
Yes.
we're not doing it in a defensive measure, but
being
trying to be
we're being
proactive.
proactive.
Right.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Pappy.
So I would just add that another thing that I think that service safety has also talked about, or safety's talked about, is the rising of some of the buildings out of the floodplain.
Correct.
And I think that's really important because if people realize if we do have a flood and it breaches into that area, there's the potential for the waste to then go into the river. And that seems to be really important.
Mm-hmm. Councilmember Patterson.
I just kind of wanted to follow up on Member Reisner's comment, and that is that one of the things was beneficial in this plan is the septage, which is EPA-based. It really could have ranged anywhere from 2% to 1.64%, and with the septage credit, we came in at the 1.8, which is extremely beneficial, and that's because of our prudent plan of taking in sewage, septic.
Mayor?
Again, it's been a lot of work for both the Public Works as well as the auditor to get these numbers. Again, the concern was might be having operational money difficulties down the line. The main reason to emphasize this is that we'd be looking over a long period of years where we're doing an incremental increase in our sewer rates. And the point of that is that we have to fund this. This will go out to 20 years. 19 million is quite a chunk of money. So we want to make sure that we can fund it in the future. We can't really prepay it by definition. The idea is to improve the facilities that we have right now. It'll increase the capacity, but not so wondrously that we can just, go whole hog. I mean, you basically go within a certain limit. I think he's talking about 0.5% growth each year. I think the discussion was with Director Stone. So again, we're just trying to improve our infrastructure, invest in our infrastructure over time. And actually, if you get a 100-year flood, I don't think anything we do is going to make a difference at that point. Just so you know, I mean, we're not guaranteeing against the 1% deluge that might occur.
Yes, Councilmember Gosney.
This is a colossal project, and I think there's no doubt that it's time to do something on this scale for the treatment plant. I have a couple questions, or thoughts, I guess, and some we've discussed before. One is upgrading so that we can take in septage, I think, is a great thing. We should be careful to make sure that, and I don't know where state law stands now, but careful to make sure that frack waste and other industrial wastes are not allowed to be put into that septage connection.
The way I had this discussion where I sat in on the 60%. They could go to a certain percentage of designs. I think at the 60% point I sat through there, I was asking the same question. What they be doing is they have a holding tank where they do an analysis of it before they put it into the system. So it'd be tracked along the way. And again, we would probably be scheduling people so there would always be a continuous flow, but no place where we'd have to put it in before we test it. That is an important factor, And actually, the people who bring it to us would be responsible if they didn't give us, if they gave us something that's not supposed to be in there.
And on that same topic, I know currently there would be a state requirement to accept that type of material, but I'm not sure that it's explicitly outlawed by the state at this point.
You mean
For a municipality to take
Not into-
brine
no.
solution.
It's
No,
outlawed
not
right
into
now.
a waste
That's not currently
system.
allowed.
I talked with Andy Stone about this. He's pretty confident that
Okay.
is something that, through knowing the haulers and testing and regulatory, the EPA doesn't allow it either. I think the OEPA doesn't.
Okay, good.
So,
So we should be safe from
right,
that.
it's the permit. If they permit an injection well, that's,
Okay. Two more topics. One is just coming from a state budget meeting and hearing Jack Freck talk about some of those in our community that aren't quite as well off as most of us in this room. Continuous increases in our city rates affect the poor disproportionately more than they affect everyone else. And not many cities have something like this, but I think it's worth exploring whether we could have some type of program for low-income households, elderly that are on a fixed income, or otherwise people that are not very well off financially, that might have trouble paying their city bills at some point. Just something for people to think about and perhaps consider at some point. Third, it's been a while since I saw the exact construction documents where there were the alternatives X, Y, and Z and all the way through. Are we overbuilding? I know we're increasing capacity by quite a bit in order to anticipate future growth and to open up the possibility of expanding our sewer system. Do we need to go to the extent that we are?
Pretty much. Actually, we can't overbuild that much. The conversation I've had with the designers, the engineer guys, is basically the EPA will not really let you build something too big. They're looking at the finances as well as we. So they would say this is not practical. You will not get the business that you're estimating, and we will not make the loan because you can't finance it. Such. I mean, they're looking at these numbers as well. We have to make a convincing argument that we can fund what we're going to borrow. There's always been unknowns on that. You were at the municipal luncheon. I sat down and talked to Gal Police there, and they have an agreement with. We have this discussion going on with an agreement with the county.
Right.
They have an agreement in place as well, but they're in a different situation. The way I understand the conversation, this is a luncheon table, so we didn't sit there and play with calculators, is that they actually have their capacities at 50%. They've had a drop in capacity over time, so therefore they're out in the township, surrounding township and county looking for business, unlike we have another situation. We're running about, I think, 70% capacity right now. So we've got room to grow. The idea is to make sure we keep it growing at that point. We're not going to build something that will not operate or can't operate safely, or rather at an appropriate capacity, I guess is the term.
Councilmember Fall.
And I'd like to point out that this whole discussion and expansion is completely separate than the discussion that we're having with the county. We will go, whether or not the county and the city come to an agreement, this sewer work, needs to be done, and it's not being, we're not creating new capacity for the county. So that's completely different, and this would be the same numbers no matter where the county's coming in, because it's the amounts that are coming from the county are relatively inconsequential when you look at the whole package.
And might add that this builds on the earlier work when President Sands was on the council, as well as Nancy Bain, and did a lot of work on what was needed, what is going to be needed for our city in the future. And so very much respecting both of your work on that and the planning for it. Three items then that we would need to consider. One, if these amounts look reasonable, and that we would proceed then with authorization and appropriation for construction and construction engineering. So that would be one thing. And what is our deadline is, if this looks appropriate, March 28th is the deadline by which we would need to have paperwork in place to notify the Ohio EPA so that we could be able to sign contracts for a loan. Engineering and Public Works has also requested us a very minor allocation of $5,000 that would come from the sewer plant cap fund in case there were unanticipated expenses that couldn't be covered by the loan. And I've given the scope and size of the project. I think the $5,000 is reasonable. The third item, and I would like us to revisit this based on your comments, Councilmember Gosney, would be whether we're enacting legislation that bring in some of these rate increases now, but taking into consideration possibly building a program for low-income assistance, see if there might be some other models out there, Auditor Hecht, in other cities that provide that.
Fixed income.
Because I think, or fixed income. Because what I would like us to think about is we have the rates in effect, the rate increases through 2015, but the way these loan payments rework builds on these increases here. And one way to consider it might be build in the loan or the sewer rate increases now in a piece of legislation, so that we know that the money, based on current information and customer numbers, will make it so that the city's not in jeopardy, so it will raise enough revenue to raise money, and then possibly incorporate then that fixed income assistance. Comments?
I'm certainly in favor of something being worked in for fixed income. As I look at the numbers, and I'm kind of looking ahead, and I'm wrapping my head around the 31% over the course of this particular project, what may not sound like a lot, it's $66 increase over the long haul per year, from 422 to roughly 506. Again, my math might be a little bit off, but in looking at that. On the flip side, which is interesting too, is when you look at the numbers on the table that we have before us of the 7 different cities and what is paying, it still puts us, number 4 on that list. So we're still lower than some of our sister cities.
Okay, thank you. Member Butler.
Thank you. I would just add as well that I would support looking at working with fixed incomes as well. I did receive a phone call during my last campaign about a concern regarding rates for someone living on a single budget, fixed income, and this jogged my memory of that conversation. So I applaud Member Ghazi for bringing that to our attention and would support efforts to look into that as well. Thank you.
Mayor Weil?
Total rate increase would be 31% over 20 years. So we're talking about over, it's not a large, it's a cumulative. Again, if you're going to put this in legislation for it to grow without, as you say, the ordinance we have right now stops at 2015. If you want to put it in, I think there was a section in there about looking at annual reviews in terms of the dollars. I mean, the auditor's office will do that anyway, but you might want to put that in the legislation. The other point in terms of low and moderate income, realize we are 72% rental in the city. So therefore, you could talk about keeping the rates low and everything like that, but there is a part in between what the utilities cost and what gets charged for that. Many people have their own utilities as rental, some of them do not. So there might be a slight disconnect when you say, let's keep it at a certain rate, and let's give some kind of credit for somebody who may be renting, and therefore it may not even make a difference along the way. I mean, as I say, it's not a one-to-one mesh we're talking about here. It's 72%
So,
rental.
yeah,
Well,
not as easy as some other cities who don't have the large rental population.
I think the average in Ohio was, 34%, so
It's
we're
the
totally
flip
inverted.
side, right.
Does the loan have to remain at 20 years? Could it be extended longer to make that a more manageable amount for some
It costs you more as you extend the
in the
loan.
long run, but
And
They said it's just like OWDA, there's no early payoff or anything
Okay.
like that. As the auditor, I would reinforce, looking ahead to being able to pay this. This budget takes into account operating expenses. As an Athens City resident, as we all are and have to be, I don't want our, current infrastructure to suffer because we're paying off this loan on this plant. I think it's important, and I think that when you average out these increases, that's the average amount of increases that we have been doing for years, and the same for the water. 3 to 4% is pretty average increase from one year to the next, and it jumps up a little bit there at one point. That might not be necessary. If it's revisited every year, as the mayor said, maybe we won't need that 5% for 1 year. In the meantime, 3 and 4% is pretty much what we've done every year anyway. So I don't see that as a huge hardship.
Auditor Heck, I really appreciate you bringing up keeping the current infrastructure going. I think, there were 2 water line breaks today that I know of in my ward. So,
Right.
it just,
Yeah, court and ring, I think it's boil waters, I assume?
yeah.
Yes.
It's constant. We know a lot of our infrastructure is old, and we also have obligations to our employees, especially with union contracts that we can't default on. And so we don't want to be in a position, as I was my first year in office, of taking out a loan to make a loan payment. So,
And if I could just clarify, I don't think that the proposed rate increases are very high. I think it's moderate, and it's something we've done for as many years as we've responsibly looked at our budgeting for this infrastructure. What I was referring to, someone on a fixed income, is something I've thought about since I've been on council, and I've mentioned it once or twice before when we discuss these sorts of things. So, not specifically in regard to this project. I think we have to do this, and the proposed increases to pay for it, I think, are absolutely necessary. So.
Mayor Weil?
I would acknowledge our cost of housing is high, we live in a city that we're competing with the rental market for student housing. So we are different than other portions of the county as a result. So when you talk about, I know working at the university, and you know as well as I, a lot of the custodians and a lot of the green men, whatever they use the term, do not live in the city because they can't afford it.
Right.
So yes, there are issues about housing and utilities. Again, this will cover operations and maintenance. Hopefully we'll have enough buffer if there's ever a catastrophe. We usually don't get the same type of breakage for a sewer, but we do occasionally. So we have to also put in that mix as well.
Hearing no other comments, and then welcoming this discussion that we've had about it, we'll proceed forward then with at least the construction and construction engineering appropriations, and that I didn't sense any disagreement with the $5,000 additional money for costs outside of the loan. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Next agenda item that we have is not listed here, but I would like to take it in this order. It has to do with staffing, and this is an appropriation of money that is needed to be made for council budget. Mm-hmm. And as I understand it, there needs to be an appropriation made for aides that the City Council employs to work with our technical government channel. These would be 2 aides at $9 an hour, and the money that is needed for this to be appropriated would be appropriated from the general fund balance. And if you, Auditor Hecht did distribute some copies of our unappropriated balance. That's your large sheet, the 8.5 by 14, that shows the general fund does have an unappropriated resource balance of $600,000. If I'm understanding correctly on the math, what we would need in order to fund these additional aides would be $52,000. These particular positions are journalists that assist us with the newscasts for the city, and also the camera assistants with our operations. And there usually isn't a week that goes by that somebody doesn't comment and say, I saw the city council meeting, or saw something on the city website. So I think it's a resource for us that gets some of our information out. Helps us with updates on boil orders and other important information on projects. So I would urge us to consider this appropriation and for the additional money for the aides. I might also note that that previously council has had 2 full-time aides and approximately 80 hours of part-time assistance available, and at this point it's just not appropriated into the council budget. So it's not a new position we're creating, but rather appropriating the money to be able to fund those positions this year.
Yeah, in the calculations, in the rush to put the appropriation together from last year, the 020, 120, essentially the aides got dropped off. So we need to put the dollars back in. The staffing's there, people aren't.
Okay.
The money isn't, I mean.
Hearing no objections, we'll proceed forward with that. House Bill 5. That is currently the bill that I think is this fiscal year's version of what we looked at last year, which was House Bill 601, and we did send a resolution, as many other sister cities in the Ohio Municipal Association, protesting some of the conditions of that. So, Auditor Hecht, former Council Member Hecht, and current Auditor, would you please assist us with the discussion on this? And I believe you've passed out some handouts too.
I did. Thank you, Member Nicely. I passed out a summary prepared by our tax administrator, Tina Timberman, today. As Member Nicely said, last year they introduced it as House Bill 601. This year as HB 5. And there are a couple things that have been added. Most of it is pretty similar. I don't know if you want me to go through this. I think we are not opposed to uniformity. There are 579 taxing entities in the state of Ohio, and people who work in more than one, and their auditors or accountants, have issues with that. We're not opposed to that at all. However, I'll read the last paragraph that Tina wrote on here with the cuts by the state. We really can't afford to put uniformity measures in place that will cause us to lose any more money. She said, my conservative estimate is that the city of Athens will lose an additional $200,000 per year if HB 5 is passed. This is in addition to the estate tax loss of $260,000, local government fund cuts of $400,000, and personal property tax elimination of $150,000. The additional loss of revenue represents 14% of our business income each year. So we can go through some of these if you have any questions. The NOL is the net operating loss. We don't allow that at all now, which allows a business to carry over, if they have a loss one year, to carry over that loss towards credit when they do have revenue. We're not totally against it, although it started out as 20-year NOL. We could have people taking credits for 20 years and never pay any business, taxes. So we know for sure our average loss would be $60,000 a year, but it has the potential of being much more for any businesses that come into town. As we know, there is one coming in now that will start off, probably with a loss and then try to increase. Throwback, this is money from internet sales. And while, as you know, I can't mention any businesses or companies or anybody by name, I think you'd be surprised at the amount of money, revenue that people make by with internet sales within the city. She estimates our loss of almost $77,000 a year, and that's really just, tax avoidance. We're talking about business income here, not, whether you're going to pay sales tax. This is income tax on businesses. It's really just tax avoidance by selling your stuff on the internet rather than through a storefront. Certified mail they've put in there. They want any bills marked as an assessment. This is a new one for this year. And if they want assessment written on there, if you do that, you have to send it certified. So it would probably cost us about $30,000 a year to send out our tax bills. The 20-day rule, currently it's been 12 days. Since I've been in office, they want to make it 20 days, which is 4 weeks. Those are working days. It's a little bit hard to calculate the full effect, but she believes she's identified over $20,000 in lost withholding tax for the first 20 days being exempt. The way it is now, once you hit that day 12, you owe for the entire time. If you work 13 days, you owe for all 13. You don't get 12 free days, whereas you would get, in a month of working in the city, there's a lot of construction that will come and go within that time, and no income taxes would be paid. The other issue is the definition of a day. We have people who spend part of their time in the city and pay a reduced rate, and that has to do with the definition of a day, as Tina mentions on here, and what you consider that. And their definition is, it's just mind-boggling to try to read. Right now, it's preponderance of a day, so that wherever you spend the most time is where you pay your taxes. And this makes it really complicated and probably would mean we wouldn't be able to collect any of it. So the elimination of the 2106 reduces refunds by $7,000 per year. Partnership income, this is another new one that was added to this bill, will now be allowed to offset wages. We can't calculate it yet because we don't allow that. We make partners file differently, but the idea that if you're in partnership with somebody and you have a loss on the business, then you can turn around and credit that loss towards your personal income is, it's just, it's really a lot of taxes not being paid. Under 18, qualifying wages are taxable, reduces $1,000 in refunds. We allow refunds for anyone under 18, so that's pretty minimal additional withholding tax collected. assessments. It makes it more difficult to collect delinquencies and judgments because of the assessment process. They have it all laid out. There are things in there that we just don't even like. They will tell us what days we have to be open and what our hours have to be and different things like that. And so some of the holidays that we float, we won't be allowed to do that in the auditor's office, or the tax department anyway. So it's pretty constraining. The Bright Line residency, I don't know how we would calculate that effect, and that has to do with people who have homes in warmer climates, you might say, and how they go back and forth, and it's their domicile. You know, if they own a house here, we consider that their domicile. However, this will probably change it to the actual amount of time that they spend there. And so all they have to do is spend 6 months in one day somewhere else, and then they don't have to pay our taxes, that kind of thing. So it's a lot of it feels to me like just ways to get around paying taxes. And as I said, these are, it's just really hard to swallow a lot of this. Our staffing cost, we don't know what that would might become, but additional staffing may be needed to comply with the burdensome issues and procedures. You know, mailing those types of assessment letters is time-consuming along with expensive, and there's a lot of other issues going on here. So needless to say, we are against the House Bill 5. And it's not that we are just saying we don't want that. The Ohio Municipal League has brought forth their own version of a uniformity bill, and we've been involved for probably at least a year in those committee meetings and talks about what would work and what wouldn't work. I think one thing that has to be taken into account, and we know this from Athens, that we don't have the same issues they have in Columbus or Cincinnati or Cleveland. And so some of these things that might feel like they'd work in a bigger city are really going to, you know, cause us issues and be hard on us, cause us a lot of loss of money. So also I think the Dayton area tax administrators are putting a uniformity bill together. So there are options out there that are more acceptable to administrators and especially the tax administrators who've been meeting regularly throughout the state to put something together that's not put together by legislators who don't actually, you know, collect these taxes and see what these look like. So did you have a question? Or?
A question, just what's the time frame that this?
Well, this has been introduced, so it is being considered. As you know, the budget bill that's out there has not been given a number, and so they're trying to move it along very quickly. So we have a resolution. It's really a version of one of the two that we looked at last year, and we picked the longer one, and Tina updated it with actual amounts and information, more current information. And so we can send this to you if you're interested and review it, and you guys can make any changes, but we would, we'd like to move a resolution along if you're okay with that. I would, Tina would be mad at me if I don't read one thing she put in here, and I'm not saying you have to keep this in here, but I think you should know that, and we have the article that shows this where one of Governor Kasich's administrators was quoted as saying, "The administration is providing the level of state aid it feels necessary. We have a state law system in place that provides the local governments a means to raise net revenue to cover their costs. I think it's appropriate that the taxes are raised by the jurisdiction where the services are provided. Therefore, that's the end of the quote. Therefore, municipalities should not be forced into allowing the unfunded mandates proposed in HB 5, is what Tina is saying. So basically what that amounts to is if we aren't careful about allowing these state cuts, then it's going to be up to council to try to raise taxes locally to fund our operations.
Comments?
Otherwise, we'd
agreements?
be looking at making huge cuts and potential layoffs. And it would
Larger
be-
sewer rates.
Right. Thank you.
Councilmember Fall.
Ultimately, are they looking at being able to say to municipalities that you don't, it's going to be a uniform rate across the state?
No, I think the rate is one thing that they aren't going to change. I mean, the state has, is it 1% or 1.4 that we're all allowed to collect in the ORC. Anything above that is what's enacted by the local municipalities. No, so yeah, some of them are over 2. Most of them are, kind of average for what we have. But no, the rates would not change. Or we
And-
wouldn't be forced into a new rate, I should say.
When you look at all the money that the city will lose, do you think that that's mostly from business entities not paying taxes, or it going into the state coffers because they're now, is this another way is this another backdoor way of doing budget cuts
Yeah.
to local governments? Or?
It is. It is maybe all of the above. It's a way to, and I don't disagree with the idea that we should encourage businesses to come to Ohio. However, there were 49,000, new jobs created last year, new businesses in the state of Ohio. I think that there are a lot of things in place already that encourage businesses to come. As I mentioned, we have a new business coming to Athens. A good business, and I just think it's kind of a trickle-down thing that we're going to give our business buddies, lots of cuts, and hope that the money reaches the local citizens that or the local governments that provide services. But this combined with the state cuts is just really almost devastating. $200,000 for us is a lot. And when you look at some of the other, I don't know if any of you have seen some of the information on estate taxes throughout the state, but there are areas around Columbus, in Columbus and around Columbus that had millions of dollars lost just in that cut right there. And I guess I just can't imagine any entity, very few cities or entities have so much extra money coming in that they can afford to let go of too much of this stuff. There's always something to be done and improved, and it's just really, it's hard. It's a really hard pill to swallow in my mind. With our, $200,000 from our income tax revenue, it's a lot. That's just what we know of.
Councilmember Patterson.
I mentioned this before, and I'm going to mention it again. The thing that really troubles me the most with this is the unknowns. If you look through this list, everywhere it says this isn't calculable at this point in time. You can add up everything else and go, okay, well, that's what it's looking like. But when you're looking at things that there is nothing that you can really get firm, hard numbers, that's scary.
I sense general agreement in bringing forward a resolution then against House Bill 5, the uniformity bill. Okay. And if you could get that wording to us.
Sure will. I meant to send that
the
today.
legislation.
I'm not busy, I guess, but I'll send our draft, and as I said, you can do what you want.
Any other miscellaneous items? Yes, Mayor Wow.
A couple things. In terms of petitioning the state, I was requested by the Buckeye Hills that they would like and I'll get more information to you as I figure it out myself. I guess they're worried about the support, the government Office of Appalachia not supporting or contributing money to the Appalachian Region Commission, which is where we get some of our money. And they're kind of defunding, it sounds like. And they're concerned, Buckeye Hills is concerned, of course, that they cover several states there in Appalachia, including Athens. They gave me a draft resolution, but I'm not ready to push it forward until I look at the numbers better on it. I'm just bringing it up forward so you know that they're asking us to weigh in on and contact our representatives who are here this evening. I know they were over at the community center. I was hoping to make it over there, but I got tied up on things. But go ahead.
And am I understanding right that Buckeye Hills will be at the county commissioner, presenting at the county commissioners tomorrow
I
morning
think.
at 10:30, if people are interested. I think part of the presentation is like an annual report, but it might be a time to, ask questions.
I might just show up just to ask those questions, because I'm a little bit confused what they're looking at, except they're worried about the fact that it's going to be funded, and I guess it's like a membership where you have to pay into contribute a portion of the dollars in there. If you don't have a portion of dollars, you don't get it from the feds. And they're worrying about how this mix has been changed. The other thing, of course, is I think I was talking to my staff, John Paskey in particular. We're going to be trying for some grants for the Clean Ohio, Keep Ohio Beautiful. Most will be passed through in conjunction with the Wayne National Forest, Great Chansey. So I just want to make you aware of that. They're small grants, but the fact is we'll be trailing through them and see what they are. I think one's for a graffiti trailer. I forget what the other one is. I don't think we're going to try for the cigarette butt ashtrays, because it's just the time was too short for that, I believe. So I'm just making you aware that we're trying to proceed with some grants out there.
Well, anything we can do to assist with that would be great. Anything that we can do to try and make the city cleaner. As Councilmember Pappy has worked long and hard over the years on, and you have, Mayor, too, on Project Clean and now Keep America Beautiful, and it's still a real issue.
As I say, it's in conjunction with other entities, and that's part of the charm of it. On the same token, it will mean, I'm not sure it will be the financial entities that actually deal with it or not. That's what I need to find out exactly.
And the only benefit I would say to that is that the city can be the entity that's submitting. I know it might not make sense, or it might not work with Keep America Beautiful, but to the extent that we can establish a track record on a grant program, then makes us more likely, just as with the CHIP program or our Safe Routes to School. If we can just get one of those first grants, then that often becomes the doorway for other opportunities for us. So I'm eager.
Okay. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Okay. Any other items from Finance and Personnel?
I guess not.
We've covered all of the issues on our agenda. It's now 8:55. We're going to close this session.
This is what they sent us.